we are in the business of changing behaviors. And if you really want to optimize your health and your fitness, you have to change the actions and behaviors that you do every day, because those things add up to you becoming the best version of yourself. And when you sit down with someone who is contemplating change and you try to say, these are the 9 different categories we need to figure out to get you where you want to be, they're like, oh,
it's overwhelming.
yeah. The simple version of that, train smart, eat well, live fit.
Yeah.
And how do you make that work for you?
Yeah, because it's going to be different for everybody, because nobody lives the same day. I think it all stems from being brilliant at the basics.
We found a pretty repeatable system that's been getting not only us, but literally hundreds of other people results predictably over the last several years since we've been in business. Welcome to the Higher Form Podcast, where high performance meets real life. We talk about how to grow with intention, lead with clarity, and feel strong in every season. In today's episode, we're going to talk about principles and processes for living a healthier lifestyle. My name is Nick.
I'm Britni.
And we're going to dive into ways that we help people professionally on a regular basis for eating, sleeping, living healthier and happier.
Yes, all the ins and the outs.
All the ins and the outs. So diving in, I think it's important to root this back with this, along with everything else we've talked about, is an evolving process of how we can continue to refine for the optimal way to make things come to life.
Yeah. How do we help people in ever evolving industry?
Yep.
Right?
For sure. And you look back at how the health and fitness and nutrition industry has evolved, even just in our relatively short time, long time. I mean, once again, I've been in the industry since 2012, you since 2014.
Yeah.
And things have changed a lot, even just in the last decade.
For sure.
Plus, our experiences as younger individuals, college athletes, our approaches, all that stuff has definitely changed a lot, but we've learned a ton throughout the years.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with college athletes these days, but I know what we did.
Yeah, and it wasn't what we recommend so much now. Don't get me wrong, there's some good things to sit there.
Yeah.
Hindsight's 2020, right? Always easy to go back and nitpick things.
Yeah.
We're going to dive into basically how we help people in our business on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis to help set them up for success. And really a lot of that's been built on some foundational principles that we've rooted into the way that we operate and the way we personally try to live.
Yeah.
As we will always lead with, we are not perfect, and we certainly know there's other ways of doing things, but we've found a pretty repeatable system that's been getting not only us, but literally hundreds of other people results predictably over the last several years since we've been in business.
Yeah, for sure. I think it all stems from being brilliant at the basics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's a really good way to kick it off for sure.
Yeah.
And those basics are really, we call them our 6 steps for success. Mm-hmm. We've talked about these or teased these a little bit in previous episodes, but we'll dive deep on those in all the principles and things that fall in line with that. But those 6 steps for success are strength training 3 days a week. It is getting quantity of movement. So a lot of people refer to that to like steps per day.
Yeah.
Making sure you're getting that 8,000 to 12,000 steps.
Yep.
Eating mostly whole foods.
Yep.
Getting your 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night.
Half your body ounces in water.
Yep, half your body weight in ounces of water, general rule of thumb there. And then the last one being avoiding any unnecessary or excess toxins in your body, alcohol, harmful healthcare hygiene products, things of that nature too.
Yeah, yep.
But it's cool to kind of peel back where this stuff came from. So we'll go back to where we built these ideologies, and I use the word frameworks a lot, or principles.
Yeah.
None of them are things that we can take full ownership or credit for.
Yeah.
But all things that we've kind of pieced together. And I think through the course of our experience, both personally and professionally in the fitness industry, we've been able to take what we've liked from other people we've looked up to and learned from, but also things that we don't like from other people we've looked up to and learned from. You know what I mean there?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody does this these days, is you find something that you like and then you make it yours a little bit, right?
Yep.
You're like, well, I like the idea, but I'm going to do it this way or this way. But I got the concept from my inspiration over here, whatever the case is. But I think we took all of our education, all of our experience, and all of our professional thoughts and just was like, how do we want to do it?
Yep.
Right.
What kind of impact do we want to leave on people, and how do we make this work repeatably and systematically?
For sure. And adaptably.
Yeah. Yeah, because everybody's situation is so much different, right? Adaptably.
Is that a word?
It's all right.
Britni and words aren't very good friends sometimes. So.
It's all good. It makes for a good, fun, humorous conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, adaptably figuring things out, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff came to life in at least the recording or the first initial note taking of these things started in like 2018. And I think there was a point in my career at that time where I was kind of in this weird hiatus between roles at the company I was with and had thought a lot about getting into the strength and conditioning industry. So I was nerding out on all the science behind training and
Yeah.
performance and recovery. And at that time, you obviously being deep into Eat Fit with Brit, I know we haven't talked much about that
Yeah.
phase of your
Kind of how
journey.
my blogging, I started in Eat Fit with Brit, sharing recipes and things like that, and then kind of tapered off because I didn't put a ton of energy into it.
Yeah,
I was working and just it evolved into kind of some of the philosophies that we use now,
for
which is,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, we had this whole idea of Eat Fit with Brit, get fit with Nick, and we're like, it's going to be the Britni method. And
Yeah.
obviously,
The
these
first
things evolve.
iterations of what would business be like together, you know?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I remember sitting down and being like, I'm going to write a manual for all of the different beliefs and principles and things that we operate off of and how we live healthy and the way that we coach people and our belief system.
Yeah.
And
It's like something that you would do.
it is 100% something I would do. Put me in front of a whiteboard or a computer
Or an
and lock me
Excel
in a room or an
document.
Excel document and let me go to work,
Yeah.
especially on something that I'm super passionate about. And
Yeah.
fitness obviously being something I'll nerd out with anybody and
Yeah.
everybody on.
Yeah. I think you just wanted to, we kind of just brain dumped all of
Hmm.
our ideals and beliefs in how do you eat and take care of yourself? What is your training supposed to look like and the progressions and, you know, everything from how do you take care of your mental health and your stress and just all of it, right? It was
Yeah.
a big document that had just like everything written down.
Yeah. And I have that document right here. So I'm going to pull up some funny, not funny so much, but funny when you look back on it because, or ironic when you look back at it, because a lot of these things are things that we still talk about on a regular basis now.
Yeah.
And every time I ever open this, I'm like, man, that's crazy. You don't realize how much your principles are rooted in the way that you operate moving forward. And I think in fitness, especially, even in nutrition, you talk about all these different trends and all this noise. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you can find anything on the internet that's going to support what you want to believe. So if you think you should never have carbs again and only do HIIT training and yoga, you're going to find evidence that supports that. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. You can find evidence either way for no matter what subject you're looking for.
Yeah, if you don't
Yeah.
like cardio or vegetables, then you could probably find somebody that's proven that wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
see like the Twinkie diet and like all these crazy things that people have proven to be the method that
Yeah.
is the going to be the game changer for you. And what I feel like I've been able to learn through experience, and you can speak to this in your own way too, is that principles over practice or specific practices or methods are what's going to really allow you to take leaps and bounds. And what I mean by that is, let's take exercise, for example, is the principle of developing stability and mobility and
Mm-hmm.
strength and endurance and all the different variables of fitness are going to be understanding how to move the needle with those variables are going to be different than saying, I'm only doing bodybuilding, I'm only doing CrossFit, I'm only doing yoga. Those are methods or tools in the toolbox.
Yeah.
But you can't just do one thing if you want to truly maximize fitness, you know?
Well, and I think that's where we talk about this all the time. Obviously, we're in this business, but that's where having a coach comes into play because you can take all of these different things and you're like, okay, well, here's my goal or here's what I want. How do I do it all?
Hmm.
Right? How do I put it into action? How do I make it fit my life, my schedule? Because you can read all the articles or you can follow this program, but if you're like, I just don't know how to tangibly apply it, then you'll never get the outcome that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to our tagline, train smart, eat well, live fit.
Yeah.
And how do you make that work for you?
Yeah, because it's going to be different for everybody because nobody lives the same day.
Yep. Everybody's lifestyle, their schedule, their
Yeah.
demands, their capacity, like all those things are going to shift and change.
Yeah. Yep.
And going back to the document, the thing that we talk about a lot in the process of helping people make that change is the different steps or processes of change. We had a coach present on this in a meeting a couple weeks ago. Coach Jackie talked about the stages of change model with our team.
Yeah.
It was neat to see her apply something that we've talked about in conversations off and on over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And the model she talked about was the trans-theoretical model of change, or the stages of change model. There's 6 different stages. The first one being pre-contemplation.
Yeah.
So essentially, this is where somebody's really at a point where they're not really considering or willing or able to change. They're really just not in that mindset of being able to make a shift in their life, whatever that shift might be. The contemplation phase being where somebody is seeing the possibility of change, but they're really uncertain about what it looks like to make that leap. Then you have the preparation phase where somebody is like, all right, I know I need to do it. I want to do it. Let's start lining out what that's going to look like and how I bring that to life. And then the action phase, it's where you start making changes, big or small. You're taking steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then getting into maintenance and avoiding relapse by getting into recurring behaviors, right? So you hear people talk about this stuff or that model in addiction scenarios as well.
Yeah.
And we have clients who have struggled with that, or clients with family members who have struggled with that. And it's something we discuss with our staff is we are in the business of changing behaviors. And if you really want to optimize your health and your fitness, you have to change the actions and behaviors that you do every day, because those things add up to you becoming the best version of yourself.
For sure. And I think that's today's day and age of using medication, the big Ozempic, or getting surgery or doing things is kind of it's a short-term fix for a problem that's going to be a long-term thing for you.
Yeah.
If you don't change the behaviors to maintain the end result from doing something like that.
And it's important in order to make the changes and do all the like nerdy fitness stuff and nutrition stuff that we'll dive into and all the different things we'll unpack. It's important to understand the process of actually bringing that stuff to life comes back to your decision and your actions and your plan. And like you said, always easier to do when you have a coach, whether that's
or somebody to run it by with, or help you
or support staff or a structure.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about today was this concept of body, mind, and self. I actually pulled this from a Netflix documentary that I saw. Jonah Hill talks with his therapist. His name is Dr. Stutz. I believe the documentary is called Stutz. So if you haven't checked it out, it's worth checking out.
Very interesting, yeah.
Very interesting. This is an elderly man who is a psychologist and therapist, and he helps people by using frameworks to be able to help them understand how to really reorganize their thoughts, their mind, the way that they use ideas to change their life. And he has what he calls the life force pyramid. Imagine a triangle. At the bottom of the triangle, kind of like the food pyramid, but think of this for more like behavior change. The bottom of the triangle is body. And he talks about how exercise and nutrition and sleep are the foundation chemically and neurologically and physiologically to changing the way that you think and the way that your body operates and your ability to physically steer yourself in a different direction.
Yeah.
He talks about the middle one being people and the value of healthy connections and social support and being in environments around other people, whether that's paying for that through mentorship or coaching, or just surrounding yourself with other like-minded people who are looking to make those changes. And then getting into the ultimate pinnacle of becoming the best version of yourself is prioritizing exercise, movement, sleep, physically taking care of the one vehicle you get, your body, putting yourself in those environments, and ultimately to achieve that peak version, the highest form version of yourself.
There it is.
There it is. About really learning how to hit those two base pillars, but be able to be self-reflective, to be able to develop that sense of love and compassion for yourself, and to really be more introspective and understanding in who you are and who you want to be. And it's cool because when we were looking up notes for what we wanted to talk about today, I was thinking body, mind, and self.
Yeah.
And you looked at me like, that's not actually what it is.
But that would make sense too. But I also think mind and self go together, because your mind is your highest self, your introspective view and thoughts.
Yeah, your belief systems. Yeah. And it goes back to like, all right, in order to create change, you have to look at all aspects, physically, mentally, emotionally. Another thing we've talked about before is the deep health aspects from precision nutrition. Yeah, and I don't know that I'll have all of these off the top of my head, and I didn't bring them with me, but I'll take a stab at it. It's physical, emotional, spiritual, environmental, social. I'm sure there's one more that I'm missing, but it just talks about deep health from a manner of collectively looking at.
If you're not hitting all of these categories,
you're leaving room on the table.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that going back to the brand that we've built and the way that we help people, that's what Avexia is all about.
Yeah.
Is deep health and wellness.
Yeah. How do we help people create change in their life to see the deep health that they're seeking
For sure.
on a bigger scale.
For sure. And the way that we deliver this has been really as simplified as we possibly can make it. That's part of that evolution. And the way that we help people is at one point we had it really high level details.
First iterations of how we would help people was us nerding out on all this stuff. And then we realized not everybody can take in all the sciencey version of this information like we can.
Yeah.
And so to find a way to make it digestible for
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
anybody, we've had to make multiple iterations of how we help people.
Yeah, the digestibility
and the
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the concepts still stay the same as you imagine this big umbrella of stress. Life is stress, good, bad, indifferent. And part of becoming the healthiest version of yourself is equal parts learning how to tolerate those stresses, but also managing what stresses are necessary, which ones aren't, how to navigate the ones that you don't control.
Yeah, you know what this reminds me of is we were at a business conference and Alex Hormozy was drawing the vase of the flowers, and then he had the one dead flower hanging over the edge. And it's like if you're got all these things going right, but you've got this one dead one, it's holding you back, right? Or it's preventing you from having this nice pretty bouquet because you've got this one drooping over the edge. I feel like that's a simple way of explaining the deeper thought here.
It's a good visual, right? There's so many different ways and analogies you can bring this to life, but the bigger picture is under that umbrella of stress, what different things can we influence? And the three categories we originally had it as were awareness, recovery, and performance. And under awareness, it was something as simple as just breathing, mindfulness practice, and daily movement. Under the recovery side, it was sleep, nutrition, hydration. And then on the performance side, it was mobility and stability, strength and skill, and then power and conditioning. And when you sit down with someone who is contemplating change and you try to say, these are the 9 different categories we need to figure out to get you where you want to be, they're like, oh shit.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah. The digestibility of it was not great. It was a little bit too much to bite and chew.
Yep.
But finding the stress sweet spot, the concept behind that is gold. And I think that's a big part of what's allowed us to help people be successful is taking these principles and applying them. But really the lesson we've learned along the way is how do we make it more simplified and easier for people to conceptualize and apply.
Yeah. To still see the progress that they want to see without it feeling like daunting because there's so much for somebody to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the simple version of that goes back to train smart, eat well, live fit. And unpacking that, starting with training smart is doing things that stimulate the right amount of response that you're looking for or generate the response that you're looking for, but not overstimulating or understimulating.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's so common for people to think that the only way to get progress in fitness is to feel sore as shit or to feel like they're drenched in sweat. But if it doesn't feel hard, then it must not be getting me where I want to go.
Yeah. We've even had clients who came in and was like, well, I wasn't like too sore. Is that okay? I'm like, yeah, that's okay. That doesn't mean things aren't happening, right?
Yeah. Just because you're not wrecked doesn't mean that it wasn't effective.
Yeah.
And some of the tools that you can use for this, a heart rate monitor, for example, but even just starting slow and building up is a really simple concept, one I think people overlook. And it's easy when you get excited and you recognize you need to change and you start taking these steps to go all in on it and then overdo it. And I feel like that's something that's common in the fitness industry too, where it's like, great, let's see what you can handle. Let's go in.
Yeah.
Let's go all in on it.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to start where is best for you. And that's what training smart to us really means is figuring out, say you come in and you just had a baby 9 months ago.
Yeah.
And you're eager to get back at it and you were doing CrossFit beforehand or something that was a little bit more intense. But you had some like postpartum core pelvic floor challenges, or maybe you weren't as strong there, your recovery didn't go as well, or maybe there was pregnancy complications. It's just an example because we hear this one a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
But you can't jump back in and go back to what you were used to doing before because that's not smart training for you now.
Yeah. You got to do the base work to build yourself back up before you can get into that stuff again. I guess if we're going down that road, a lot of women in general just try to jump back into it, which I do think that there is a lot more insight these days on doing the pelvic floor work before getting back into like strength training or HIIT or CrossFit or whatever it is. So I think that's nice that there are more people talking about it and there's more information out there and awareness in general.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's easy to talk about the importance of that for females, but I think men need it just as much.
I think it's underrated. Men need it a lot too. They just, because they don't have babies, they don't think about it. You know?
Just because you don't have a traumatic physical experience, and I
Yeah.
don't mean traumatic so much from the mental
Traumatic
side,
for the
but physically,
body.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's intense.
Yeah, it is.
And just because we don't experience this as men, I think sometimes it gets overlooked. Plus, there's like this ego behind, I don't need to do Pilates style exercises. And it doesn't have to be Pilates because, once again, that's not Pilates. Yes, there are principles that go into Pilates,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not owned and only solely focused on in Pilates, if that makes any sense.
For sure. Yeah.
The idea of having a stable core
Yeah.
and a connection with your breath and your pelvic floor and your diaphragm,
It's going to support your heavier compound lifts that
100%.
you're trying to bulk up on.
Yeah, I read a study when we were putting this together, and another like nerd out moment was when I did that whole movement reset manual, and I was like, all right, sling systems and deep core stability and joint mobility and energy transfer and all these high level training concepts.
Yeah.
I'm going to distill these down and deliver them to everyday people, but it was just too much,
Still too much.
way
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah.
And
Unless you like to nerd out on that kind of thing, which is a
Well,
small
you're-
percentage of people.
and you might be one of those people, you might not. But one of the things that I thought was fascinating when I was looking into the research and stuff to put together my methods for that, there was a study where they had two different groups of powerlifters that went through the same powerlifting protocol.
Mm-hmm.
One of them had done more specific core stability work through the course of this 8-week program, and it was something like 30% increase in the group that had done the additional core stability work in their total maxes.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference was just the accessory focus on building intra-abdominal pressure and understanding how to create stability through their midsection, which makes a ton of sense when
Yeah.
you boil it down in layman's terms. But it just goes back to the foundation of movement
Mm-hmm.
is that balance of mobility and stability and understanding how to really bring that to life.
Well, and I think that's a good way to bring in that that's how everybody who comes to work with us starts is by doing a movement assessment.
Mm-hmm.
We call them an on-ramp, or let's just see how you're moving. Let's see where your limitations are, and let's figure out where you have some opportunities before you really get into the nitty-gritty of the fun training.
Yeah, we don't go straight into the overhead squat assessment, or
Yeah.
we don't do any FMS screening. Don't get me wrong, those things have a time and a place.
Screening is great regardless, but in general, yeah.
How do you control your energy? And we slap a heart rate monitor on them and let them know what are energy systems,
Yeah.
what are the different intensities that you're going to work at. Why would you do low intensity versus high intensity? What is the value between the different styles of training,
Yeah.
whether it's aerobic or it's more anaerobic or it's more max effort?
Which goes into play of we have certain class styles or training sessions
Yep.
available here that are going to hit your different zones based off of the different
Yep.
goals or needs that you're looking for and how often you should be hitting each of those zones. And
Yeah. But once we kind of get an idea of like energy systems and effort and how to control that cardiovascular response,
yeah,
it's about how well do you move through your spine?
yeah,
Your spine protects your nervous system and is the root of all of humans, right? Like
Yeah.
the first thing we develop in the womb is a little bitty spine, and then everything
Yep.
grows out from there.
yeah,
And so being able to understand how to segment and rotate and flex and extend and brace and get an idea of where somebody's at from that mobility stability aspect,
yeah,
then it's crazy because once you address that, you can usually get a pretty good idea of whether or not someone's going to even be competent in some of these other movement patterns.
for
Like
sure.
if you're someone who's stiff and you don't have any type of structural awareness of your spine and your movement space, or you don't have the stability or mobility prerequisites to move into certain movement patterns, whether it's one joint or a series of joints that aren't moving well,
Yeah,
it's going to be pretty easy to be like, all right, well, squatting with the barbell is not going to be a smart move for you out of the
yeah,
gate.
yep. Let's regress
Let's
and
let's start regressed, or
Yeah.
let's start on the bottom of the progression scale, and let's build confidence through this process.
yeah. So I think that's the bottom of the pyramid
Yep.
is the body and
Yep.
movement and movement quality.
Yep.
And once you're moving and we've got that dialed in, like, okay, this is how you're moving.
Yep.
What's the next thing?
Mind muscle connection
Yeah.
is a big part of that as well.
Well, yeah.
getting an idea of, I think that goes into it. It's just worth mentioning.
Yeah.
But then it's how can I create muscular endurance to be able to repeatably do these movements and build stamina and capacity to repeat it without things breaking down.
Yeah.
So an example, you get a guy that played basketball and maybe he's got a knee that bothered him and it's because his hips and his ankles are stiff and he's not strong or mobile through some of those areas. If we don't build strength endurance and he wants to go back and hit the court, yeah, maybe we address it and it feels good for a period of time, but we don't build that resilience around that area.
Yeah.
It's gonna be hard to get back to the performance level.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of that second tier. You think so many different fitness certifications out there.
Yeah.
For NASM, it's the OPT model,
Yeah.
where they talk about stability and muscular endurance and then kind of like working your way up the spectrum. But
Yeah.
you
That's
can't,
getting pretty granular
yeah,
again,
right?
right?
But the broader scheme,
Yeah.
mobility, stability,
Yeah.
strength and endurance, and then be able to produce power.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is overlooked even into aging. We work with a lot of clients who are in that older demographic
Yeah.
and they want to be able to still do things. And part of that is lifting a big bag of dog food off the bottom aisle at the grocery store to put it into your cart is like a deadlift, a clean, and
Yeah.
a squat, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's a power-based exercise. If we don't train for some of those things, then you lose that quality of life
Yeah.
or capacity to do daily
Yeah.
things,
It's impacting your day to day.
For sure. You smile because we literally just talked about this.
Yeah, we
client.
literally just had a client say that she didn't like how she couldn't pick up the dog food bag at the grocery store. She had to ask for help every time. And then she finally, the other day, did it by herself.
got the
And
dog food.
she's so proud, which is so awesome because that's just such a thing that you don't even think about that could impact somebody's confidence level of going about their day to day is just being able to pick something up
The
and
independence you gain from not having to
independence.
rely on other people to help you do daily tasks.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so how that's applied would look different for a 60-year-old woman versus how it would for a 27-year-old dude who
Totally.
is a former college athlete. And
Yeah.
all of these things can be applied at any end of the fitness and experience spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And then conditioning, and I think conditioning is one that it's specific to the style of living or performing you want. Do you have to be in the greatest cardio shape and be able to run a marathon? No. But if you want to be able to do that, then obviously we look at where do you want to be and let's condition to that desired outcome or
Yeah.
performance level.
And just general conditioning, shape, endurance, stamina.
For the nerds out there, a couple of things here on principles for training, then we can move on to the next phase of things. Some of the theories or principles that we really focus on are general adaptation syndrome. This is called the gas theory, but basically it talks about your body's ability to handle stress during a given period of time. It talks about the alarm phase of general adaptation is being able to start to generate a specific stress response. And then resistance is when you're starting to get to a point to where it's over stressing.
Mm-hmm.
And then fatigue is going to be a point to where you're past the overstress mark. Part of training is stimulating the right amount of stress, recovering from it and coming back. Another principle for doing that is progressive overload, but that's why deload weeks are important.
Yeah.
Is being able to build a certain level of intensity or weight or workload or effort. But if we don't ever allow ourselves to come down off of that and recover
Yeah.
and regenerate from that stress, then we end up overtraining, overreaching, doing things that lead us down a path that actually are detrimental to our success.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those two are really big principles. The last one being the SAID principle and its specific adaptations to imposed demands. If you want to get good at squatting, you got to squat.
Yeah.
You want to get good at playing basketball, you got to shoot hoops. You want to get good at running, you got to run. So it's just making sure that you get enough of the right intensity of the specific things you want to be better at,
Yeah.
and then apply them in a manner that allows you to be able to strategically find that stress sweet spot.
Yeah. Which is, again, a lot of big concepts for the average person who doesn't have certifications.
For
in
sure. But
this
I think it's
field.
important to understand that there's theories behind this, right?
Yeah, yeah, which is why we do things the way that we do things is because we're basing it off of science and data and what is best.
Yep.
Yeah.
And widely practiced principles
Yeah.
across all methodologies.
For sure. Yeah.
know?
Totally. Which has helped build the general philosophy of how we train people here.
Correct.
Yeah.
So boiling it down to the simplest terms possible,
Yeah.
train smart, which means you have to be able to move well.
Yeah.
We need to get strong enough to be able to live the life you want and have enough endurance to do the things you want
Yeah. Yep.
and build resilience.
Yeah.
The second one being a little bit more your line of expertise on the nutrition side.
Yeah.
If you want to paint a picture on our nutrition philosophy, you'll be able to nerd out on this more high level than I will.
Yeah. Again, we've kind of taken what I've learned in school, what I experienced working in a clinical setting, what I've gone through as a client myself. And we're like, okay, what is the simplest way to give people tangible things to change or support their nutrition? Because a lot of people will say, yeah, I eat pretty healthy. And we're like, well, what does that mean? Can you give me more information? Right. And so we have a lot of different ways that we can approach this, which is a part of our nutrition coaching in our system is, yeah, we have like general foundations here, the 6 steps to success. But in terms of like helping people with specifically what they're eating, you got to just see where they're at to start, which is like training. Where are you? Where are
Yeah.
you in your movements?
Periodization for nutrition.
Periodization for nutrition. Where are you in your eating? And then you go from there. How do we build? A lot of the times it's more about trying to add things to what they're currently doing. Of course, there's probably things that people need to take out, but again, when somebody's doing a big overhaul or has a lot to change, you can't do it all at once. So you have to say, okay, what are the important few things that we can add into what you're doing now to help you get going in the right direction? So like I said, we have a nutrition foundations, which is a big overhaul of here's our philosophy. Now, how do we get you started in it? And that looks different for every single person that walks in.
Yeah.
Some people like to track macros because they've done it before and it worked for them, and they like the science, they like to see the numbers. That's okay. And we can help support them through that. Some people, that's overwhelming. Weighing their food, doing all of that is too much for them, especially off the bat. So we will suggest maybe just taking pictures of their food where they can submit it in our app to their nutrition coach, where the coach can at least get a view of what foods they're eating and general portion sizes of what's on their plate. And then from there can give them like advice and suggestions and tools to help them build a better plate. Say those are primarily the few ways that people will track their food with us is pictures, just talking about it, writing it down maybe versus pictures, or the nitty gritty of tracking macros.
Yeah,
But
no, when we first started, we had everybody track macros and we tried to drill down to like super high level details on things, and it actually
we
we
learned
had
that was
worse results.
too much for most people. And there are some people who are fine with it and like it, and that's fine. And we will adapt to for them. But most people start off with just taking pictures of their food because it's the simplest way to, one, track what you're eating, and two, at least be having some feedback available from a coach to see,
And
right?
self-feedback too.
And
I know when
self-feedback.
you're going to take a picture of something,
You're like,
I'm
oh,
going to think twice before I have to send that to somebody else.
exactly. You're like, oh, I'm eating this right now. I have to send that to my coach right now. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Maybe you think twice about it, depending on what it is. But also, we balance. I don't want to say 80-20, 90-10. I mean, again, depends on what the person's goal is and
How serious they are,
how
how
serious
much
they
progress they
are.
see, how fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whether they're looking for a significant weight loss or muscle gain, or maybe they're just trying to be healthier in general. Everybody's got a different goal there, but yeah, I think that's just one of the simplest ways for people to just start out tracking their food.
Yeah.
Writing it down or taking pictures.
Yeah.
Then you can get into the deeper stuff. But overall, like most of our clients with our nutrition foundations, we go over the 6 steps to success, which is what you mentioned earlier, the training, the drinking, the sleeping, all of it. And that goes back to being brilliant at the basics. Because if you can't do those basic things, we can't go deeper. Those are the basics. Until you're doing those consistently or regularly or 80 or 90% of the time, we can't go to the next level of helping you with your health. All these supplements and all these other things aren't going to make that much of a difference if you're not doing the basics. And that's what we've learned is people will have all kinds of things going on with them. And if they just try to simplify what they're doing with their days and with their food and with their lifestyle, they're going to see the progress that they want.
Yeah.
Right.
And one thing that keeps coming back to the top of my mind while you're talking through that is the simplicity of applying it, right? And we've talked about the alternatives to macros pictures. We talk about hand-sized portions as well.
Yeah.
So it's a palm of protein, fist size of carbs, a cupped handful of veggies, thumb-sized servings of fats, and being able to meet people where they're at with what they need and how they track. But the sustainability is the thing that really forced us to shift gears, the compliance and the sustainability. When we realized that we had a great nutrition program from a technical standpoint, but we weren't getting the results that we were expecting and we had when things were more simple, we drilled back and went super duper simple.
Yeah.
And we said, let's take pictures of your food. We gave people plates and suggestions around, like, at breakfast, you're going to do a carb, a protein, and a veggie. At lunch, a carb, a protein, a veggie. The gap between your biggest meal is going to be a protein snack. We can apply that with other things depending on how many more calories you need for energy.
Yeah.
And then at dinner, you're going to do a veggie, a fat, and a protein. And then looking at serving sizes based off of, yes, we'll look at the macros and the details and the calories on the back end, but really, if your goal is to gain muscle, we need to eat in a surplus. So it's not
Yeah.
taking away the principles of it, it's taking away the difficulty and the challenge of actually applying these things, so that it was so simple. Eat from these foods on this list. This is how much you need for servings. Here's recipes for this. Just providing them with those simple resources and making it so foolproof and easy that it makes the compliance go up. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, we're able to repeatedly see progress now, because one, to your point, it's balanced, it's sustainable. If they're 80% in and they eat 3 meals a day for 7 days a week, they got 4 meals that they can probably, as long as you don't go off the rails,
Yeah.
cheat, quote unquote, a
Yeah.
little bit with.
Yeah. And I guess this makes me not reconsider what I'm saying, but that is just for general habits and building a sustainable approach to the way that you're eating.
Yep.
If you have a very specific goal weight or fat loss number or something that you're trying to hit, you will see progress making some of those changes initially. But if you get stuck and you have a lot of people are like, I got to get the last 10 pounds. I can't get these last 10 pounds. Okay, great. We're going to have to get more specific because your body has lost a lot of the extra weight that maybe it was hanging on to. And if you want to see that last little bit of progress, you might have to count your macros and go a little bit deeper and get more specific, because you can't do that just hanging out and measuring with your hand necessarily.
Yeah, for
Once
sure.
you get to that next level, precision nutrition talks about like levels of clients.
Glad you brought that up. That
Level
was
one,
literally
level
something I
two,
was thinking
level
of earlier
three. So
too.
it's level one is the basics. Let's take pictures of your food. Let's just get you eating better choices. Level two is maybe counting your macros, getting a little bit more specific. Level three is getting even more granular with
Micronutrients.
food timing, basing certain foods around certain times of your day and workouts and things like that. Yeah. So there's levels to build to enhance and optimize your nutrition.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. This is going to turn into a 2-part episode. I'll just put that out there now, because there's still a lot of things that we're going to need to go through, and we're coming up on a time limit we set to keep your attention.
Yeah.
So we'll keep talking about nutrition. We'll put a button on that, and then we'll come back around to some of the other things that we had noted. But train smart, eat well, eating well being in simple terms,
Yeah.
eat mostly whole foods,
Yeah.
prioritize protein,
Yeah.
use fats and carbs strategically to give you the type of energy you need to meet the demands of your life or the performance you want.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Plan in advance. I think this is one we should talk a little bit more about, and how
Yeah.
we use really simple pen and paper meal prepping sheet with clients,
Yeah.
just to help get ahead with planning for eating healthier. The world we live in, there's so many convenient options out there, but 90% of those convenient options are things that are counterproductive to achieving a healthier outcome.
Not even that. I mean, that for sure. But this even happens in our house sometimes if we didn't get as organized on the weekend or something leading into the week, where you're in the middle of the week and you're just like, I don't know what to make. You know, it's 5:30, it's dinner time.
Do you have any pizza?
I'm standing in my kitchen and I hadn't started cooking yet, or I have no
Yeah.
idea what to make. And so I think taking the time to plan and organize on Saturday or Sunday or whatever, like your planning day is, or organizing yourself, grocery shopping, whatever day you're doing that stuff on, is just line it out. What am I going to make these days? Or at least have a general protein source picked out with a carb, with a veggie. It doesn't, again, we talk about this too. Not everything you make has to be like a recipe. You know, you can grill up some meat.
I was literally just talking to Nate about this. Beef and berries, beef and bananas sounds so crazy. You got a protein, you got a healthy carb. You can go through and do, some nights we'll get that Costco steak that's pre-made sous vide.
Yeah.
I'll do that with some microgreens, dice up some bell peppers, cook some rice and throw that in. It's not really a meal, but it becomes one.
But it's balanced. It's got your protein, it's got a carb, it's got fiber with your veggie additions, and the steak technically is a little fattier too. So that's a balanced plate. So not everything you have to make has to be like, I'm following a recipe. It can just be like, I'm putting sources of food together to make a bowl or a plate.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I know that another big thing that we talk about is the value of a balanced plate versus going all in on no carbs, no fat. Obviously, people understand the value of protein in today's day and age. But even then,
if not, they're living under a rock.
Yeah. Or maybe they're vegan or vegetarian and they
but even
struggle
then,
with it.
You still have to find ways to get your protein in if that's
Correct.
your style of eating.
And if that's your style of eating, more power to you. And it's just more or less finding what works for you and being convicted. The reason why you do it is not because you watched What the Health on Netflix
or
and were convinced by some documentary that was paid for by certain people to make you believe a certain thing.
Yeah.
That could be a whole topic in itself too. Be careful.
Go off on a tangent there.
Yeah. Well, cool. We had a lot of other things that we want to talk about. Obviously, all the principles and beliefs and systems and things that we put together for how we help people change their life. It's hard to sum up all the things in one episode. And I think going to depth was as important for us as trying to do a broad stroke. That's the whole reason this platform is here.
Yeah.
Is for us to be able to share our beliefs and give you a better understanding of how we do this so you can learn and take away, like we talked about, what you like or what you don't like, but see how what we say matches up with other people and other influences in the space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll come back around in the next episode and we'll talk more about our principles and processes for healthier living. But until then, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, you can follow us on social media and tune in anywhere you listen to podcasts.